Welcome back to the Parkhurst Trading Card History, the long-awaited Part 2 of our deep dive into one of the hobby's most iconic brands. If you haven't watched Part 1 yet, I recommend starting there, as we are following this story from the beginning, a chronological journey through Parkhurst's rise and the lasting legacy it built in the trading card world. Now, let's get right back into it. Just when we were all set to jump into the hockey release, and the knockout licensing war that followed as we teased in the last video. But hold tight, before we hit the battlefield, it's worth hitting pause and adjusting how we look at the timing of the release of these sets. Of the 41 trading card sets Parkhurst produced, only 14 were hockey, yet hockey became their identity, their flagship, the very heartbeat of the company. We instinctively think in hockey terms that the release of product lines up with the season kicking off in October. But Parkhurst's production cycle played by its own rules. Here's the real timeline behind how their hockey sets came to life, a key piece of context that sharpens everything we covered in the last video and sets the stage for what's coming next. Parkhurst had settled into a steady annual system for its hockey card production. July and August were devoted to player photography, often a race to capture rookies and recently traded players. September and October shifted toward artwork, design layouts, checklists, and packaging. By November and December, the presses were running at full speed. And, right on schedule, early January delivered cards to store shelves, perfectly timed to peak seasonal interest and after team rosters had been locked in. With all that in mind, the 1954-55 hockey release, for example, wouldn't actually hit shelves until January of 1955. Okay, now that we've said our piece, and we're all on the same page, it is finally time to move into the 1954-55 Parkhurst hockey and open the chapter on one of the hobby's fiercest battles. This was the moment Topps, using O-Pee-Chee as their foothold into the Canadian market, went straight for Parkhurst's livelihood. What followed wasn't just competition, it was a full-on clash over licensing, team rights, and, ultimately, control of the entire hockey card market. Now, George Kennedy was well aware that Topps had been courting O-Pee-Chee. Word travels fast in the gum business, especially with American Topps baseball packs, had been filtering into Canada for a few years now. But Kennedy wasn't losing sleep over it, and as far as he was concerned, why worry? Let them sell the baseball. He knew Canada's heart belonged to hockey, and he had exclusivity in that arena. Or did he? While Parkhurst had finally found its groove and business was running at full stride, that's when Topps struck. Like a Bobby Hull slapshot, George Kennedy believed he held exclusive agreements securing all 6 NHL teams in perpetuity. But in 1954, Topps challenged those contracts as an illegal monopoly and quietly convinced the NHL and the 4 American clubs, Boston, Chicago, Detroit, and New York, to sign with them instead, and they did. It was a behind-the-back ambush that reshaped the landscape for Parkhurst overnight. To keep things quiet, Topps left the Canadian teams alone, feeling that Kennedy himself would bow out on the financials alone. Now it was just a waiting game for Topps. The reality for Kennedy was that the financial gap was staggering. Parkhurst was paying just $22,000 in total to all 6 teams under their long-standing agreement. Topps came in with an eye-popping $15,000 per team. That's $90,000 annually. And it wasn't just doubling the rate. Kennedy was only paying $3,000 to each of the American teams, while Topps was offering 5 times that. What team wouldn't sign? Topps knew the offer had to be substantial. It was an unmistakable signal. Topps wasn't just testing the waters. They were aiming to push Parkhurst out, expecting Kennedy to bow out, and fully prepared to scoop up the Canadian teams without hesitation. Parkhurst nickel packs were never built to withstand that level of financial firepower. Even producing roughly 18 million cards and selling 3.6 million packs generated only about $70,000. Not nearly enough to survive a licensing war of that magnitude. What Kennedy never expected was the idea that Topps was merely supplying baseball packs through O-Pee-Chee. They were just humble distributors to Kennedy. But Topps, they had a sharp eye for taking businesses and were already taking on Bowman Gum in a very similar play. For context, here's how it all began. In 1952, after overestimating demand and flooding their warehouse with surplus unsold baseball card packs, Topps turned to their northern peer at the O-Pee-Chee Gum Company to help move the excess stock. O-Pee-Chee gladly obliged. This harkens back to the age-old story of 1952, Topps packs being overprinted and has become hobby lore. By the early 1960s, it was said that Joel Shorin, Topps company president, dumped 400 cases of those 1952 baseball cards into the Hudson River, a legendary tale that still gets retold in the hobby to this day. From 1952 onward, Topps continued supplying baseball cards to the Canadian market. By 1954, the partnership became official. Baseball packs now carried O-Pee-Chee branding as Topps's new Canadian licensee. Kids across Canada were hooked, and Topps saw an opening. If baseball cards could thrive north of the border, imagine what hockey could do under their business model. Now let's get back to the Parkhurst side of the story. Kennedy refused to fold. He fought to keep the Toronto Maple Leafs and Montreal Canadiens, the two biggest draws in Canadian hockey, agreeing to pay the $30,000, likely helped by his friendly ties to Foster Hewitt and Frank Selke. Parkhurst would still feature all 6 NHL teams in its 1954-55 release. The production wheels were already in motion, the retail relationships were established, and Kennedy had paid those licensing fees up front. But let's give credit where it's due. The 1954-55 Topps hockey set wasn't just a debut, it became a hobby landmark. Topps came out swinging with bold red, white, and blue American colors and striking artwork that jumped off the candy counter shelves. They also loaded 6 cards per pack, compared to Parkhurst's only offering 4, which both companies still offered for a nickel. And in the eyes of many collectors today, that first Topps release actually outshines the 1954-55 Parkies, set by a considerable margin. Financially, though, the war was costly for both sides. 2 companies, 2 products. The same kids buying. The math simply didn't work. Something had to give. But Topps had one card still up their sleeve. Woody Gelman. Before the 1950s, sports card dealers, as we know them, barely existed. Most cards were sold through antique shops, ephemera dealers, or classified ads. In 1951, New York businessman Sam Rosen entered the trade, running fulfillment for the Topps Trading Card Guild. His stepson, Woody Gelman, co-owner of the studio behind the 1952 Topps baseball designs, soon became a Topps employee, designing and producing cards but used Rosen's business to move excess inventory. For hockey, Topps had the license and handled production, dropship cards to O-Pee-Chee in Canada, while reserving some 1954 Topps hockey sets for U.S. sales through Rosen, who advertised his catalog to collectors. Nepotism at its best. This mail-order system quietly kept Topps hockey investment alive. The entire 1954-55 Topps 60-card hockey set could be purchased for just $1.80, with hundreds of sets available. So that steady stream of mail-order revenue helped cover the $60,000 licensing costs, a lifeline Kennedy likely never anticipated. And we are sure he didn't think Topps would survive considering the circumstances. So here we are. Parkhurst controlled the heart of the game, Canada's teams and Canada's retail marketplace. Topps controlled the financial muscle and the strategic machinery of an aggressive North American company on the rise. Both believed the other would be the first to fold. But this was no longer just business. This was a fight for the soul of hockey cards. Now that the stage is set, and we're all caught up in the battle lines drawn, it's time to shift our focus back to Parkhurst and their story. To think, Part 2 is really only just beginning, but the contextual history is important to understand going forward. The 1954-55 wrestling set somewhat straddles the hockey production by likely being a little prior to the January release of the hockey. The wrestling set consisted of 75 standard-sized cards, each numbered in the top corner, with a yellow digit inside a small red box, very much like the hockey issue this year. The backs featured the wrestler's name, a notable attribute, and a brief bilingual biography. Nearly all Parkhurst sets were fully bilingual, meaning both English and French appeared on the cards. In addition, the reverse included a wrestling trivia quiz question, with answers directing collectors to other numbered cards in the set. This set first housed the variation of the Lucky Premium card backs, which replaced the wrestler biographies on the back with a mail-order offer for one of 4 items pictured. The premiums included a flash camera, a pair of field glasses, what we'd now call binoculars, a Hopalong Cassidy boy's wristwatch in a stylish presentation box, and a Cinderella girl's wristwatch displayed in a clear plastic slipper. Every card in the set exists with one lucky premium back variation, unlike the hockey set soon to come, and this effectively turned the 75-card issue into a 150-card checklist for collectors dedicated enough to chase them all. For pack and/or wrapper collectors, two different wrapper color variations are known, one with a two-tone orange and black design, and another with an identical layout printed in orange and blue. Because a similar wrestling set was issued in 1955-56, the wrapper can be conclusively assigned to one specific year. As we know from past production, Parkhurst frequently used color variations within the same release, and the overall design of this wrapper aligns most closely with the wrapper design style used during the 1954-55 period, something we will further discuss later. Finally, we arrive at the 1954-55 Parkhurst hockey, as they return to market with a 100-card set, maintaining the familiar dimensions of 2.5 inches by 3 5/8 of an inch, a size collectors had now come to recognize and appreciate. Of the first 88 cards, 57 featured either the standard biostat backs or, alternatively, one of 3 lucky premium backs, very similar to the wrestling. Offered was a pocket-size miniature deluxe camera gift list, likely of assorted offerings, or a pair of junior professional hockey gloves. This created a fascinating complexity for collectors, as the remaining 12 cards at the end of the series were action shots without any premium backs. Additionally, 31 of the regular player cards retained only the standard biostat backs. When all variations are taken into account, the set expands to a total of 157 cards. Parkhurst offered a hockey card holder album, their third consecutive year in a row, very similar to the previous year's version, but without the set date. Ordering an album to house the set would only set you back just 25 cents. This naturally leads us to the 1955 TV and Movie Stars issue, a 45 standard-size card release, showcasing a terrific cross-section of the era's top stars and personalities. One notable change was the card backs, printed in blue ink and featuring a TV or film trivia question, with the answer printed upside down. Unfortunately, no full wrappers or boxes for this set have surfaced to date, only a partial wrapper image found in the Very Best brochure. And what is Very Best, you ask? Okay, let's talk. By 1954-55, Parkhurst was undergoing significant changes beyond the licensing battle. It seems that John Stewart Sales, the jobber who had handled distribution, had served its purpose, and Parkhurst was ready to take control with its own sales force. They retained Ashton Potter for printing, got rid of the old guillotine cutter, added a card slitter, and weren't done innovating. In a particularly curious promotional twist, Parkhurst partnered with the Very Best specialty company to send mail-out order forms directly to the public, targeting enterprising individuals eager to sell Parkhurst's overstock, door-to-door and through friends, family, and acquaintances. There's nothing wrong with a little side gig in the 1950s to earn some extra money. Why not? Many hockey players worked construction or sales in the off-season, and some even owned restaurants or coffee shops. With Very Best, participants could earn commissions or, if they preferred, choose from a range of prizes instead of cash. If you've ever read a comic book, the Very Best specialty company name might ring a bell. They were well known for encouraging kids to sell seeds, stationery, and a host of other small items for extra cash. Parkhurst simply adapted that approach to move leftover packs, using Very Best mail order system and this brochure as a tool. The brochure also features one of the few missing Parkhurst wrappers, the TV and Film Stars pack, which, to this day, has never surfaced. Unfortunately, it's mostly obscured behind the 1954-55 hockey pack, but we'll take what we can get. Even so, its presence confirms a 1955 date for the Film Star packs, though that timing was already supported by the movie reference information printed on the backs. We now arrive at the 1955 Race Against Time set. This was a compact 40-card release, printed in Parkhurst's standard card size. The theme highlighted record-setting achievements on land, in the air, and at sea. It's an incredibly vibrant set, in my opinion, one of Parkhurst's most creatively executed. Not just the cards themselves, but the whole presentation. The wrapper is distinctive, and the display box could rival anything I've seen from that era as a colorfully designed countertop attention grabber, from not only a marketing point of view but aesthetically too. And once again, Parkhurst leaned on a proven promotional tactic: free card packs inserted into specially marked boxes of Kellogg's cereal. This would ultimately become their final foray into cereal tie-ins issued by the company. This brings us to the 1955-56 hockey set. And the funny thing is, if you listen closely, just for a moment, you can almost hear it off in the distance. Where was Topps? Much to Kennedy's surprise, Topps didn't issue hockey cards this year. Why? No one really knows. In fact, Topps was absent for 2 straight seasons in a row, and while the exact reason remains unclear, it was certainly for something significant. Many believe they were tied up finalizing licensing arrangements, but by 1956-57, Topps had their hands full absorbing Bowman gum. With Warren Bowman being a good friend of Kennedy, the two surely discussed the shifting landscape, and Parkhurst would be prepared for the challenge when Topps eventually returned. The 1955-56 Parkhurst hockey release is a slightly trimmed down set from 100 to now 79 cards, and only features both the Montreal Canadiens and Toronto Maple Leafs, Parkies abiding to the new licensing agreement, with the usual 4 cards per pack, clearly not intimidated by Topps' previous release with 6. This set also incorporated the old-time greats of former players from these two teams. Each card also has a hockey trivia question on the back. Although this set is numbered to 79 and without getting too finite, there are some additional errors and/or variations. One of the most intriguing twists with this set is that Quaker Oats issued a full parallel version in 1955-56 as well. Both runs share identical fronts. The only real tell is on the reverse. The Parkies carry the familiar red ink backs, while the Quaker cards switch to green and add a nod to their cereal promotion. With all that was going on with the licensing, did Parkhurst sell the rights for these cards to Quaker Oats to supplement the additional fees Kennedy was paying? A good friend of mine, Nathan Obed, began working back in 2021 on an ambitious project, reconstructing an uncut sheet of this series entirely through miscut cards. With a bit of help and a lot of patience, he pulled it off. The sheet you see here is the result, a monumental achievement and the earliest known Parkhurst uncut sheet, aside from the obscure 1962-63, to be shown later in our Parkhurst video series. Well, hobby friends, we've reached the end of part 2 of Parkhurst's history of trading cards. We didn't quite make it to 1960 as planned, but part 3 is already in the works. And that's where things really heat up. The battle of the brands spills into the non-sports issues, a chapter that's barely been documented, pushing the rivalry even further to the next era. All the sports information is available in great detail on the Needham website and app, covering all vintage hockey and CFL football. The full list and details of the Parkhurst non-sports are also scheduled to be added to the Needham website and app in the very near future, so stay tuned.